This is from a direct questioning and persecution of Christians at that time.
And who found this out?
While
Not by questioning, but by torture.
And then we have neutral and hostile sources. So we have Roman historian Tacitus, we have Jewish historian Josephus, we have Pliny the Younger. He was like a Roman lawyer. He used to persecute Christians.
When you see hostile sources like this, and they are making reference to the person of Jesus within the time that, the letters of the apostles claimed that he existed, it just goes on to say that this person wasn't made up. Because if it was a made up figure, someone who hated him wouldn't be writing about him.
Yeah, exactly. Let's read out the statements. We have Tacitus, Annals 1544. Christos, from whom the name Christians had its origin. So from this document alone, you can see that it mentions Christians, that this person Christ, that's where we got the name Christians from. Christos, from whom the name Christians had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of Pontius Pilate. This corroborates what Luke clearly, articulately documented. And let's read the first chapter in the book of Luke to see that Luke was he carefully wrote a journalistic account of the gospel. What you have in the book of Luke is it's an amazing journalistic account. It made references to so many things that we find historically and geographically credible.
So Luke chapter 1, I'll read.
Yeah.
It says, many people have set out to write accounts about the events that have been fulfilled among us.
Yeah.
They use the eyewitness reports circulated among us from the early disciples. Having carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I've also decided to write an accurate account for you, most honorable Theophilus.
Yeah.
So you can be certain of the truth of everything you were taught. So this shows that the book of Luke is not just a theological book. Luke was an investigative journalist.
Yes.
So this was his report.
You can see that he's not one of the disciples. Luke was one of the travel companions of Apostle Paul. He also wrote the book of Acts. One of the Gospels, you'd be wondering, who is Mark? Mark, his full name, John Mark.
Mark was a disciple of Peter and also a travel companion of Apostle Paul. He traveled with Paul and Barnabas for a while.
And we know that John himself was a direct disciple, was a direct eyewitness, primary source for Jesus, and Matthew was a disciple of Jesus himself. And then we have Pliny the Younger. He was known as a Roman lawyer, and he worked under the rule of Emperor Trajan. And so he described Christian worship of Jesus as God, because he persecuted lots of Christians, so many of them. And in the process of persecuting, he would question them. And in a letter he wrote to Emperor, he wrote that they were in the habit of meeting on a fixed day before dawn and singing a hymn to Christ as to a God, and to bind themselves not to commit fraud, theft, or adultery. This is from a direct questioning and persecution of Christians at that time.
And this is so powerful, and it also speaks to some people who believe that yes, Jesus was a historical figure, or believe that the early Christians did not worship Jesus as God. This is a hostile source affirming that yes, early Christians did sing to Jesus as God, which is so powerful.
Yes. And it's also very powerful because this is not a later invention. This is an hostile source.
Who found this out?
While
not by questioning, but by torture.
By questioning and
you don't
torture,
lie when you're being tortured. Next up on
Josephus
the hostile and neutral sources.
We have Josephus, a Jewish historian. He didn't really care much for Christians. There was a political and religious tension in that time, in the time of Jesus. So what Josephus said, James, the brother of Jesus, who is called the Christ. So he corroborated the fact that James was a brother to Jesus. Okay. And then in Testimonium Flavianum, he said, at this time, there was a wise man called Jesus. He was the Christ. He appeared to them alive again on the third day. That Pilate condemned him to the cross. The Jewish historian mentioned Jesus' existence, that Jesus was condemned under Pontius Pilate, that Jesus appeared to us again the third day.
And this is crazy because there's a sect of the Jewish people that do not even believe in resurrection. They're called the Sadducees. In the time of Jesus, they do not believe in the resurrection, who were heavily hostile not only to Jesus but even to his disciples after Jesus had resurrected. So it's so powerful when we see a neutral source like this saying Jesus was not only crucified, pointing also not only to the historical accuracy of the other accounts of the Bible, but also going ahead to say that he appeared to them again after he died.
There is a debate. The original one we had said he rose again on the third day because they believe that it was neutral. So if he said he rose again and he believed he was the Christ, it means that he believed in Jesus. Since his language was kind of hostile, he appeared to them again on the third day. And so we are going with that. Look at another one. The Babylonian Talmud, which described Jesus' miracle as sorcery, but it's highly debated. Sanhedrin 43a, execution of Yeshua. They call him Yeshu. This is the most famous passage. On the eve of Passover, they hanged Yeshu, and a herald went out before him for 40 days, saying he is to be stoned because he practiced sorcery and enticed Israel to apostasy. Anyone who knows anything in his favor, let him come and plead for him. But nothing was brought in his favor, and they hanged him on the eve of Passover.
I mean, the death of Jesus Christ, because we have some people who also did not believe that Jesus died.
Yes.
They did not believe that Jesus died on the cross. But now we have a totally neutral source saying and attesting to the truth that the Bible had always said, that Jesus really died.
Yes, and then it was making a mockery as well as his miracles as sorcery.
So even though these accounts are mockery, they further confirm the historicity of Jesus. All of these point also to the historical reliability of the accounts in the Bible.
Another fantastic one is the darkness evidence. You know, in the book of Matthew, when Jesus was crucified, the Bible talks about darkness that happened around 12 to 3. You see that? And for so many people, they're like, it's fiction. It didn't really happen until we began to see documents, extra biblical sources mentioning a darkness around 33 AD. People began to argue that it's the eclipse, right? The greatest eclipse in the world, earthquakes around 33 AD.
The same time.
The same time frame.
Crucifixion.
Yes. So we have that by Phlegon of Trails. It says in the time of Tiberius, there was a great eclipse of the sun and earthquakes, but an eclipse cannot happen during Passover because during Passover is during the full moon. So there was an inexplainable darkness that we just can't uncover.
Further evidence for the events that the Bible mentioned.
Yes.
An earthquake happened.
Yes.
Darkness after Christ
died. And then Julius Africanus was trying to respond back to tell us that this was not an eclipse because eclipse does not happen during a Passover. Lucian of Samosata. The Christians, worship a man to this day, the distinguished personage who introduced their novel rites and was crucified on that account. And then it was impressed on them by the original lawgiver that they are all brothers from the moment that they are converted and deny the gods of Greece and worship the crucified sage and live after his laws. So it has a mocking tone that the Christians worshipped a crucified man.
Further testifying to the claims of Christianity that these were not just made up. They were known to even people who did not believe, to even hostile sources, that these were the claims.
Yes.
Even if they are neutral sources, mockeries, but the name is mentioned, time is mentioned, the events were mentioned. So can we go to some of the archaeological pointers to some of the times?
Yes, archaeological confirmations. We spoke about the fact that archaeology is not fail-proof, but it helps us to build our confidence that, yes, the people we're mentioning interacted with real rulers of that time who existed. We can find the coins of rulers, these politicians, in real places within that time period. God forbid Jesus was born in Bethlehem, or we are seeing Nazareth, we are seeing the Sea of Galilee, only for us to research and realize that Galilee did not come to exist until the 3rd or 4th century. It becomes a problem.
So it means that if books or the authors or the biographies of Jesus claim that Jesus was born in Nazareth 4th century, and we eventually find that Nazareth did not exist until the 50th century, hypothetically speaking, there is a problem. But when we're able to find archaeological evidences pointing to these places within these times that the Bible mentioned, it goes ahead to further confirm the claims.
So let's look at the New Testament archaeological confirmations. We're able to confirm that Pontius Pilate existed. We found an inscription Pontius Pilate, we're able to confirm that the pool of Bethesda exists, the pool mentioned in John 5, where the man paralyzed for 38 years, that exists. The pool of Siloam, where Jesus healed the man who was born blind, exists.
Mm-hmm.
Nazareth exists, Bethlehem exists. We found the heel bone of a crucified man called Yehohanan. It just also alludes to the fact that crucifixion existed, the way that the Bible described that his hands and his feet were pierced.
This is not to say that those were the hands and feet of Jesus found.
No.
It was just evidence to the
Yes.
fact that crucifixion
Existed.
was a common thing
This is another
done by
man,
the Romans
yes.
within the time of
Yes,
Jesus.
and this was found in Judea, where Jesus was actually, tried and all of that. And then we also found the ossuary of Caiaphas the high priest, who was one of the people in Jesus' trial. So ossuary is like a bone box that consists of the bone, and so we're able to find, his name inscripted on it. So we're able to know that he also
existed.
existed.
So the Bible is making
right?
references to these people that we had not even found. As at when the Bible, like now, we are just finding their historical evidences. We're just finding through archaeology their remains. We're able to see that the Bible mentioned Caiaphas, the high priest. The Bible mentioned these people. And now we're finding the remains of these people. Goes further to confirm.
And Pontius Pilate's inscription as well. And then we also have other things like the Sea of Galilee. They're able to find boats today that date to the 1st century. The sea that Peter walked on, that they said there was a great storm. Oh my goodness. If you go there, the people that fish there say that the storms there are very, very terrible. You don't fish to a certain point because it can really get really, really bad. And so the way Peter was scared, he reached to be afraid. But Jesus said to him, "Oh, you of little faith." First of all, say, "Oh, you of little faith." Like, to tell them that you have a valid reason to be afraid, but don't be afraid. So you too, I don't know about saying this.
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. Jesus got you.
Period.
Walk on water. Walk on water.
Hallelujah, somebody.
All right. We also have evidence of Tiberius Caesar. We have, for the Second Temple, some of the walls are remaining. We have of Golgotha, the Garden of Gethsemane, Bethlehem, Nazareth, Jerusalem. And, there was a claim that Nazareth did not exist in the 1st century. There were so many debates about Nazareth as well, until they found that, yes, it's a small village that exists. So many of these things that we're seeing that exist, earlier, there were many debates that this is just a myth, it's a sham, it doesn't exist, until archaeology came to confirm that these geographical locations actually existed.
Before we go into our own perspective on the evidences that we just shared, and this is not all, this is just a few of the evidences that we have for Jesus, it's important for us to know and for us to let our viewers know that it is not a historically debated fact that Jesus Christ of Nazareth was an actual historical figure. Atheists, people hostile to Christianity, and I'm not just talking about people in the ancient world, I'm talking about people today. It is generally agreed upon that Jesus Christ, was a person who existed in the 1st century. Bone of contention is not whether he died or whether he claimed to have been seen after his death. The bone of contention is what to do about Jesus.
And the claims about who Jesus was, what he did, came in very, very early, too early to have been corrupted, too early to have been exaggerated or to have been developed into a legend. We're talking about months to at least 60 years after his crucifixion. And today we still have surviving manuscripts that date back to the 1st century of Jesus Christ. The time gap between the original writings and the copies that we have till today is quite early compared to others. For people like Plato, we don't argue about Plato. Plato is the father of philosophy. His manuscripts, the earliest surviving manuscripts, came in 1,200 years later. Those are the earliest surviving manuscripts. For Caesar, 1,000 years. For Alexander the Great, 900 years. For Jesus, it still dates back to the 1st century. That is significantly early for ancient world. So if you deny the existence of Jesus,
it means that every other ancient figure is a lie.
Yes.
Because Jesus, there's more evidence for Jesus than there is for Plato. than for Socrates, than for Julius Caesar.
And
So
for
if
Tacitus even wrote about him,
so if we're
the
saying that Jesus
historian.
did
Yeah.
not exist, we're saying that ancient history is a lie,
You
and
you
that
you
all of
collapse ancient history.
the figures in ancient history, they are
Yes,
lies, that they
yes.
are myths or fables or made up.
On the multiple manuscripts that we have, based on their voracity, the way they spread across, making it so difficult to have been controlled, based on the geographical and archaeological confirmations that we have.
And most importantly, the most powerful, based on eyewitness account.
Thank
Eyewitness
you.
testimony is the most powerful testimony even today. One of
Powerful.
the most. Look into all these evidences that we have mentioned. Do your research. Come to a conclusion. And I think it's very important to understand, like we have said already, the process it should take you to come to a conclusion. Don't just find a random document on the internet and say, oh, because of this document, I no longer believe. No, go through thorough process of investigation and come to a conclusion that you can bet your life on.